Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. Darren Mitchell here on a, beautiful, as of this recording, a beautiful start to the working week, being a Monday, and have the absolute privilege of speaking with Angel Luk, all the way from Vancouver in Canada. Welcome, Angel.
Thank you for having me, Darren.
It's going to be a great conversation. We were talking just before we pressed record. This is a little bit different because you are a registered dietitian. You work in the public health space in Canada, but also you're an author and a speaker. And we're going to talk about high performance, particularly as it relates to selling, and why diet is so important to high performance. Because I know for a fact that there are a lot of salespeople that are listening to this, and probably a lot of sales leaders who could most probably do with a bit of an overhaul of their diet, let's just say.
Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect.
No, we're just burning the candle from both ends, I think. And if we think about it, and I must say this comes at a really interesting point, because just prior to pressing record here, I just happened to look at LinkedIn, and a colleague of mine who was once removed from me, sadly passed away over the weekend, and just brings to bear the I guess the shortness of life. And I don't know any circumstances around it, but as we get older, and a person who was a Generation Xer, more and more I'm starting to realize how important diet is. So looking forward to jumping into this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Darren, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
Yeah, it's it just blew me away literally before we press record. But it happens. It just makes you realize that life is very, very short. Now, let's talk about you. Let's talk about, I love to delve into this conversation around diet and high performance. For the listeners, if you can just give us a little bit of background, Angel, in terms of what you've done, because your LinkedIn profile is also very interesting, because there's a reference there to the International Olympic Committee. But what got you started in this industry, and what kind of has led you towards high performance? Because I know you do a lot of work in sports as well.
I mean, my journey as a dietitian began about 12 years ago, and long story short to that end, I really just wanted a career where everyone would be equal. And what I mean by that is food affects everyone, no matter who you are, you need to eat. And not only does it kind of unify us in that way, but it also brings people together and have empathy, sympathy, and all those lovely traits. And I think that with the career that I've had, like you said, I've had a lot of interest because the people that I served, had the honor of working alongside, have really shaped me to think, prevention is key. Self-care is key, and setting smart goals, not just in our professional lives, but also in what we serve in the dinner table, is just as important. Because if we want to be around for the people that we love, it kind of all starts from there. Are we looking after ourselves so that we can be better for the people we love and the people that we serve? And so I also had a fascination with sports at a young age. I was never good at it, but it would just, watching the Olympics as a kid, I can bring myself back to that old little TV and just think, what must it take for people to perform at superhuman levels on a consistent basis? Like, what fuels them, like literally, to be like that? And so that's why I pursued the International Olympic Committee's 2-year sport nutrition diploma, and graduated in Switzerland, and then had the opportunity to work with athletes from all levels, but the highest level being Paralympians at the Richmond Olympic Oval here in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Nice. And when you do all of that, when you look at those, let's just take the high performance, because this podcast is dedicated to exceptional sales leaders, and that kind of equals high performance. Is there anything that really stands out in terms of their diet? Because I've got lots of questions, and one of them just wrote down as you were talking, and was this concept of intermittent fasting, and how many people either don't
Mhm.
eat for a period of time or just have some intermittent fasting. When you look at, for example, the Paralympians,
Mhm.
um, what sort of percentage of their overall preparation would you say is diet out of like
Mhm.
100%?
The ones that I worked with, surprisingly, like you would think that it's maybe like a third or some higher percentage, but
Hmm.
honestly, it might be like 10%. And that's for so many reasons. It's most of that reason, in my opinion, is, and my observation is, they just don't have much time.
Yeah.
Like the time that they need to spend on their sport is not just the hours spent on the court or whatever sport that they're in, but it does take them extra time because of their physical abilities to actually get from place to place to place to place.
Yeah.
And at least the Paralympians I worked with don't have much of a funding. And
Hmm.
so they're needing to afford groceries and afford a living space. And Vancouver is not a cheap place to live. And so all of these things and socioeconomic factors play into, well, I know what I probably should be eating, but can I afford it? And do I have the skills to prepare it or even the time to make a home cooked meal?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I say kind of 10%.
Okay. So with that then, if you look at high performance and people in either the Olympics or Paralympics, they're extraordinary performers and amongst the best in the world. The physical elements around training and I guess their craft needs to be continually worked on. From your experience, because what I'm getting to here is we're going to talk about whether diet potentially is sabotaging your performance, whether that be sports performance or in our case sales performance and so forth. Um, with the availability of coaching and approaches in British Columbia, um, how much of the diet is really focused on as an element for high performance? So when you look at the people, because we think about, okay, there are different countries at different levels of funding, and so it's not necessarily an equalization sort of process. So people come from a little way back. When people are looking at 10% of their overall preparation as diet based on affordability and so forth, how much of the diet has an impact on their ability to perform at an exceptional level?
I'm extremely biased, Darren. I mean, I wanted to in my head. I'm thinking 100%.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you just all do all the eating and no physical training or mental, like sports psychology, then no, I can't take all 100%. That's a funny question. I've never gotten that. Let me say at least 50%. At least 50%, because you really can't out train a bad diet. I mean, I know it's corny because it's the title of my book, but like honestly, you can't.
Well, let's talk about this because I know from personal experience, having gone to a gym many years, and I've had a bit of time off this year, but it's interesting that there are some people that over a period of time you can see definite changes
Yeah.
in terms of their physique, even their energy levels and how they're training in terms of capacity and so forth. And then others don't seem to make any change whatsoever. And I've often just wondered, is this just science? Is this something else that's playing out? Or are they not really taking too much care in terms of what they're putting in their mouth?
So glad you bring that up because it is a fascinating point. Why is it that two people can do supposedly the same training thing, but have such different outcomes?
Hmm.
One thing to keep in mind is like something really easy to conceptualize is belly fat. Let's just say you go to the gym and it's like, well, why does guy A or girl A and the B counterpart
Yeah.
look so different after a year of commitment? Well, what we can see is like just the subcutaneous fat, which is the fat just under the skin, the fat that if you poke Pillsbury Doughboy goes, but the unhealthy fat actually lies beneath the abdominal wall, which is called the visceral fat. And that's the fat that causes all the issues, the increased risk of colon cancer, all these health issues like prediabetes, diabetes, high cholesterol that causes then, of course, like people leaving this earth far too soon from high cholesterol or heart attack and stroke. What I mean to say is what we cannot see on the outside is how the visceral fat level is decreasing with every ounce of exercise. So even if we feel like that 30-minute walk on our lunch break, just to get fresh air, to be fresh for the next sales pitch or whatever it is we're doing,
Yeah.
like inevitably that unhealthy fat is going. And that's why I often, whether it's high performance, whether I'm speaking with a Paralympian or someone who's just trying to do better so that they have more of themselves to give at home after a 14-hour workday, you know, it's about forget the scale, forget what you sometimes look like, and really hone in on what are the non-scale victories. Like, are you breathing easier?
Mm.
Are you more energetic? Are you able to focus in a meeting and not doze off in a warm meeting room, by 30 minutes in? Or are you able to, I don't know, not go to the drive-through for the third time today because you don't need that caffeine kick to last you to, I don't know what hour of the day to pick up more client calls. Mm-hmm. Did I
So,
did I hit did I hit a nerve with some of
oh,
those points?
well, I think there's a lot of salespeople I know that probably do a lot of coffees each day,
Yeah.
especially if they're out and about. But it's an interesting thing you talk about because I don't think many, and it's probably a gross generalization, but I'm not sure that many salespeople in a business context are placing huge amount of emphasis, and it might be again a generalization on their diet because they're more focused on the outcomes and trying to drive what they're trying to drive at their business, unless of course they have like a health drive or some sort of mechanism they're doing on a regular basis. It's just an interesting thing because things like intermittent fasting or skipping breakfast. I know a lot of people that say, "Hey, I don't have time. I'm just so busy. I don't have time for breakfast." It's literally I get up, I get in the car and I go because I've got to hit the road and get my sales target, etc., etc. What do you say to people around that? And I know a lot of it may have to do with metabolism and it's customized for different people, but as a general rule for high performance,
Mhm,
how
mhm,
often should we be putting fuel
mhm.
into that high performance vehicle as in our body?
As a general rule, we do recommend from a meal timing perspective to have your first meal of the day within 2 hours of waking up.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is not, your alarm goes at 5:30 a.m., but you don't like you're awake, but you don't actually get out of bed until like 6:30. It's eat with your first meal within 2 hours of actually physically waking up and not going back to bed. And that's because our bodies do crave energy in order to perform, at its best. But as for the rest of the day, you do want to space those main meals about 4 to 6 hours apart.
Mhm.
Now, notice that I say first meal, second meal, third meal instead of breakfast, lunch, dinner,
Yeah,
because in sales and many professions, you might be working all sorts of odd hours, and maybe there's time, like not time travel, but traveling to different time zones, and it throws it all off.
it does.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of intermittent fasting, and as a general rule, and I'm glad that you put that disclaimer out there that these are just general statements, but as a general rule, most people are intermittent fasting. So if you
Okay.
imagine that, let's just say you wake up at 6, you did eat breakfast by 8, your lunch was at 12, and then your dinner was 6 p.m. That
Yeah.
followed all of those rules that I just mentioned. And then if dinner was at 6 and you didn't do any late night snacking while you're finishing up your whatever reports,
Yeah.
and then fast, not eat basically, until next morning, 8 o'clock,
Mm.
well, then that's effectively 14 hours fasting, and you still actually had three main meals to
Yeah.
nourish yourself.
Yeah.
So I don't, sometimes when I get the question of should I or shouldn't I, my general statement is you kind of already are. And let me just take a diet history and show you that you've been.
Interesting. Interesting. So with this, if we take an individual that is really, really busy, and it's kind of a loaded question because you're probably going to say, well, it depends on different types of people in terms of metabolism and all that sort of stuff. Um, what are some signs that people need to be looking for that is it I'm not sure whether it's adrenal fatigue, but hunger or tiredness or drowsiness in the afternoons and so forth. That could be some things for them to investigate in relation to diet. So I know there'll be some people that listen to this that don't eat lunch or they skip lunch and they just have some caffeine and they'll eat
Yeah.
in the afternoon or whatever the case might be. What are some things that people should be looking out for that may be an indication that they need to start to re-look at their diet and maybe make some changes?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I won't say it depends. Here are some general things to look out for. So, if you're starting to feel like you're just getting into a slump or that midday kind of, man, I need something, I think that people should just be mindful of, okay, well, when was my last meal or when was my last snack? Think about the timing. Because let's just say you're feeling that way and you actually did eat a little something. Then my next follow-up question would be, okay, well, did what you eat contain carbohydrate? Because what most people don't know is that carbohydrates, our brain and our muscles' first preferred fuel source is actually carbohydrate. So if what you ate was void of carbohydrates and just maybe a garden salad with a chicken breast, and because for whatever reason you thought that that would be the healthiest choice at a fast food joint or whatever, but it actually didn't have any carbohydrates,
Yeah.
then you actually, it takes your body a longer time to digest that meal that's quite fibrous, that has protein. And of course, those are very wonderful, healthy foods, but your brain is craving carbohydrate as well. So you would have been better off having a whole grain bun along with that salad, or a slice or two of whole grain toast with, peanut butter along with that. Uh, I don't know, like that boiled egg
Yeah.
that you might have had, and really think about the timing, not only the timing of your actual meal, but the timing of your carbohydrates.
Mm.
And I think in high performance and in sales, any time where you feel like you need ultra concentration, it's very critical that you think to yourself, okay, do I have a very important meeting coming up or a very important event coming up? Because if I do, and I know that my brain needs to be sharp, I need to feed it the energy that it craves.
Mm.
Therefore, 30, 60 minutes before that event, I'm going to strategically have some carbohydrate. And not only that, you do want to have the protein and the fiber along with the carbohydrate, because then if you just had carbohydrate, it's not great either, because then it would just kind of raise your blood sugar and then it would just shoot back down. So it's kind of like, oh, I had a great, spurt of energy, but it's not lasting me through my
Yeah.
entire, 1 or 90 minute sales pitch or whatever it might be. And so you need to strategically plan out this balanced meal before those very critical moments so that the protein and fiber slows the digestion down and causes that blood sugar to not kind of rise like a elevator and back down, but rather more like a bunny hill and kind
Yeah.
of up and down gently.
Nice. And so
Mhm.
for the average person listening to this, and you're talking about, 30 to 60 minutes beforehand, strategically positioning in terms of carbohydrates. For the average person out there that just goes to a supermarket that's reading labels or is reading books in terms of this is what you should be eating or not, how do they make an educated decision around what to eat? Because I've got to say, there's a lot of different, I guess, agendas out there, but a lot of different information in terms of what's good for you, what's not good for you, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. Is it just a case of common sense and being able to read your own body and your own energy levels, or is there something more deeper that we should be really looking at?
I do think, like, if human civilization has been around for thousands of years, it's a sign that everyone is different and we
Mhm.
adapt. And that's what's unique about us, is that there are human beings living in Antarctica and in really hot places as well. So I think it goes a long way to say that no matter what, it's a combination of us understanding ourselves and how we react to food, but also keeping an open mind about what experts in the field are sharing. Because let's just put it this way, the average person going into a grocery store or going to a restaurant or a supermarket, just trying to grab something quick because they need to go back into the car 10 minutes to be back on the road to drive to their next location for whatever it is. Their minds are already full
Mm.
with everything else in their lives. So common sense in that, let's not overcomplicate it. if 100 years ago, our parents, our grandparents were able to survive without, 200 types of yogurt, like perhaps what we need to do is go back to the basics.
Mm.
So going back to the carbohydrate piece, like what is the application part of this? Well, you walk into even a 7-Eleven, like um, just grab a piece of fruit,
Yeah.
like a banana, like a large size banana would be roughly 30 grams of carbohydrate. So that could be what someone chooses. And then, a bag of mixed nuts or peanuts. If you can't find unsalted, that's better for your blood pressure. Well, then salted ones will do. You've got your protein, you've got your carb, and then hopefully a bottle of water.
Yeah.
Right. Even that is better than skipping or not eating and just going for the coffee.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It sounds common sense. But there are so many temptations out there, Angel. I'm on the road and I love a Krispy Kreme donut.
Of course you do. I mean, like I personally, I've always had a salty tooth. So like I could stare at a box of donuts till they go moldy on my counter.
Yeah.
But if you put a bag of chips in front of me, I mean, I need all my training. But I think the key is I'm so glad you bring it up because the most interesting thing about my career is over the last decade or so, I've really come into the space where it's like for high performance and for people to really, really, truly function at their best. It's about digging deeper
Yeah.
because just like a good salesperson isn't just trying to sell something, they're actually trying to find what is the pain point and what can I offer to address this and help this person have less pain with
Mm.
whatever it is that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Just like in nutrition high performance, we need to dig deep and be like, well, why are we choosing certain foods or not choosing certain foods? Because
Mm.
the iceberg, what we don't see is there's emotions, there's traditions, there's culture and heritage. There's just as much going on beneath that because I think it's an insult. I don't know if it's like I've worked with enough salespeople in my career that I think sometimes there's a bit of an insulting comment is that, oh, salespeople, they're just out to sell me something. Like I don't want to pick up their car or whatever. But I think it's deeper than that. I think it's that they're actually trying to help. At least the good ones are,
Mm.
And so just
100%.
like with nutrition, it's like, well, I'm not just out there to help people lose weight. I'm actually trying to figure out, what's important to you, what are your goals, and how can we use nutrition to help you bring you closer to your goals
Yeah.
if that's what you really want, and only
Yeah.
if you want it.
Yeah. It's a great point you make because as you were talking, I'm thinking, okay, there'll be people out there that are thinking, oh, okay, in order for me to get to high performance, whether that be in sport, in sales, in business, whatever the case might be, I have to be almost manic and ruthless in my approach to maintaining a high standard and driving even better standards. What I'm interested in your take on this because I hear a lot of high performance people talk about the fact that every now and then they need to have a down day or a day where they don't maintain all of their disciplines. They just have like a free day or a free pass, whatever the case might be. So, how important is that from your research and the work that you do in relation to maintaining high performance? That for the most part you are really disciplined, but how important is it for us to let ourselves go a little bit, to have that Krispy Kreme donut, to have those salty crisps and so forth that you talk to as part of balance?
Yes, it's actually really fascinating that planned planned indulgences where you are in the driver's seat of once a week or once a month, I'm going to do this. And it's because I want to do it. I'm not being driven as a passenger out of cravings. And now I'm succumbing to this feeling every night at 10 p.m., when the home is quiet. If you are making planned indulgences, research actually shows that it's beneficial because it actually helps foster a sense of restraint and also sustainability in
Mm.
terms of making better choices the rest of the week. Because most of the time it is kind of once a week someone will kind
Yeah.
of be more relaxed about everything. And
Yeah.
so there is actual proof that it's a beneficial thing so long as you are in the driver's seat and making that intentionally.
Yeah, yeah, but I guess also it's a little bit of moderation because if you, for example, are abstaining from alcohol for a period of time
Mm,
and then intentionally say, well, on Saturday night, I'm absolutely going to go nuts and drink, 2 bottles of wine, then that's not healthy either. So it has to be in moderation. So I think what you say is really important. That you have to be in the driver's seat and you have to have some intention around that, but also know what your limits are. Because I do know people that, and look, let's be honest, some people, whether they be high performance sports people or high performance sales people or business people, can be very interesting characters in terms of their personality or almost obsessive, and they do everything to the extreme. So when they have a day off, they go to the extreme.
yes. Yes, and alcohol is an exception to that because I mean alcohol and like even Olympic athletes, like you would think with all that discipline, but the interesting thing about high performance people is that they are so disciplined so much of the time
Yeah,
that when they finally have a chance to just breathe and let loose, it's almost like they just can't dial it back because they just feel like that is their time that they've earned to just kind of, you know, just let loose completely. So, yeah, yeah.
because it fascinates me with just digressing a little bit with the Olympics and hearing some of the Olympians talking about the Olympic Village and how the food court is one of the most popular things, but they tend to wait until after their event is finished before they quote unquote indulge. And of course,
Mm,
depending on the type of sport that you're doing, I guess diet has an even more important component to that. But everything in moderation. But I think the key message is you need to be in the driver's seat and you need to know what you're trying to do and what is going to be good for you.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because I think that the majority of people who kind of go crazy on the planned indulgences are usually, this is a generalization, but are usually the kind of people with very black and white thinking.
Mm.
Like if I'm going to let loose, it's just going to be like 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And the people with black and white thinking typically are also the people that struggle the most with kind of negative thoughts and feelings around certain types of food.
Yeah.
So I just usually like to just teach people that there's no good or bad food, you know, try to remove the labeling because all
Yeah.
food gives us something. And if we're just enjoying that and removing all the emotion behind it, then
Yeah.
food is actually just food.
Yeah. That's fuel. So
Mhm.
that brings me to ask this question, and certainly in Australia, and I'm sure that Canada will be the same. We've got the old food pyramid, right? Where we're taught from a young age to eat certain amount of grains, etc., etc. How much of diet and food, as it relates to high performance, is really individual. And by that I mean, um, sometimes dietitians or we're told, you go to a general practitioner or you go to some sort of institute of sport and they say, you must eat this and by all means remove yourself from eating that. When it comes to things like the pyramid, is it a case of everything in moderation, or do we have to be really wary of certain foods we shouldn't be eating versus we should be eating more of other certain foods?
Mm. It it really is mostly moderation. So even in high performance sports, we do use that. I don't know, health clinicians just love triangles.
Yeah.
Like we do also like that triangle because it's like really like when you're talking about Olympians, Paralympians, that's where it becomes really custom. Where we're talking about specialty supplementations, timing of that, like what's your sweat rate and what are all the nuances to you as an individual. But
Mm,
the majority of the population, not at that very, very peak performance level, we're
mm,
just talking about the usual stuff. Like,
yeah.
so it wouldn't really matter if, you're pretty high level soccer, but I'm just a working mom, trying to put me like a dinner on the table. We're still kind of recommended to follow those different percentages of macronutrients,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
carbs, fat, and protein.
Okay. All right. So it
Mhm.
still it still has relevance then in terms of the old food pyramid because depending on who you talk to, some say, you know what, it should be flipped up the other way around. Others say,
Mm,
you know what, no, follow that. But my own view is sometimes I think people have different agendas, and it depends on who they're affiliated with. And somewhere in the middle, there might be the truth. But ultimately, if you are doing everything in moderation and you're maintaining, your energy levels are, then for the most part, you should know what is relatively good for you as it relates to your performance, your energy levels, tensions, etc., etc.
Like in Canada, we actually veered away from the rainbow that we used to have, and now we're doing like a balanced food plate, which interestingly is basically just half the plate is fruits and vegetables, and then a quarter protein and a quarter whole grains,
Yeah,
with the protein being more plant forward, more emphasis on that. And I think anytime where I kind of being in this field for over a decade, like I also get kind of weary of where's the funding coming from for certain
yeah,
research articles coming out. I think the one that I think people can hone in on if they're interested in trying something evidence-based is the Mediterranean diet.
yeah.
Very much backed from a heart health perspective, and if not that, because maybe people are bored of hearing about the Mediterranean diet, then they could research the portfolio diet or low glycemic load diet eating approach. Because if I bring it back to this population that we're chatting with, today, like, and your listeners, like, I think that the majority of people who are in high performance, exceptional sales leaders of their company or starting something, they may at least for a period of their time, devote more of their time, energy, and efforts to their career than their own health. And
Mm.
it doesn't mean that their health is, immediately compromised, but chronic disease is called chronic because it happens over time.
I tell
And
you,
then
yeah,
once you have it, you spend the rest of your life trying to manage it
yeah,
because there's no cure.
yeah.
So I do really warrant people, you don't have to change your whole world all at once. But if you're really after peak performance, then what you really need to do, just like an Olympian, is, well, you don't just eat well on the day of the Olympics that you're competing in. You do it every single day, even on days you don't feel like it. And that's how gold medals are won. You win the gold medal on days where you step onto the field and train and eat well, even when you don't feel like it, because
Yeah,
you think that the prize is worth it.
yeah.
And I think that applies to a lot of careers.
I
Yeah.
think yeah, I think you're spot on. In fact, I was listening to a high performance podcast this morning, and they made reference to that. In fact, Robin Sharma was talking about the fact that elite performers in any spectre, whatever, um, you see the public, I guess, performance or the result or the outcome of whatever it is, right? But what you don't see is all the work that this person or these people, these teams put in when nobody's looking, and that might be for months, if not years, before the actual event. So you're actually quite right that I guess good habits, just like not so good habits, can accumulate over time. And as you're going through it, you may not necessarily be aware of it at a point in time each day, but over time, there's a pattern that starts to develop. And eventually, all of a sudden, this person's got a six pack and they've got boundless amounts of energy, or they're really lethargic and they can't actually get up in the morning. Which brings me to this, and that is some keys or three keys for peak. Let's just talk about peak sales performance, right? Because this could be applied to all sorts of performance. But from your perspective, what are some three keys for peak performance that we can apply to salespeople, sales leaders for better health, that they can be more energized and their performance can go to another level?
Absolutely. So the first step is repeating some of the things we said earlier is meal timing. So you
Yep,
absolutely need to have something in your system within 2 hours of waking up. And then you have your main meals about 4 to 6 hours apart.
yep,
And going back to that plate method, it's about, is there some form of carbohydrate, some form of protein, and some form of veggies or fruit out there so that you have the carb, the protein, and the fiber. And I think I can already hear a lot of the rebuttals, like, but I don't eat breakfast, I function fine. Or if I eat breakfast, then I actually feel worse. Or I've tried it, no, I know me, and no. Now, I'm not saying you know your body best. But I'm just saying, well, if this is your goal, are you willing to entertain the possibility that there's a way to train your stomach just as you've trained yourself to be proficient in other things?
Mm.
And if you're willing to entertain that slight possibility that I can train your stomach with you, then may I encourage you, instead of doing all three components of that main meal for your first meal of the day, can I just get you to switch from a coffee double double to a latte? Because then I've inverted the amount of milk to caffeine ratio.
Yeah.
And now that latte has calcium, it's got protein, it's got carbohydrate. And sure, it's probably got a touch of sugar in it or whatever, but effectively, you are giving your body more practice digesting something more nutrient dense at an earlier hour.
Yeah.
And if you do that for a couple weeks, a month, actually, what you'll start noticing is you actually start waking up feeling more hungry, and you actually feel worse if you don't nourish yourself sooner.
Wow.
So try it if you think it's worth it.
Nice. So meal
That'd be the
timing.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second key would be pick quality proteins and fibers to pair with that carbohydrate. And what I mean by that is fiber can come from all sources. You know, it doesn't have to be cucumbers if you've always hated since childhood, but pick something that you like. Like, I'm not asking you to put Brussels sprouts into your tuna salad sandwich, but if
Ugh.
you don't mind an apple with the skin on, if you don't mind a peanut butter banana sandwich for simplicity's sake, you know, fit it in some way so that you get that slow digestion and that steady energy, which is what you want to avoid that midday slump, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then quality protein means not just going for the super fatty stuff, because I think we've all had that experience where you might have fried chicken or too much turkey with the skin on, or roasted duck in my culture, and it just makes you start feeling a little bit like worse. It feels great. And then about 30 minutes later, you kind of just feel like you need a nap. Pick more lean proteins, you know. And if you really want to indulge on something fattier, like a slow cooked beef brisket with all the fixings, you know, maybe that's what you're going to enjoy on a Friday night or whatever night as a planned indulgence. Not going overboard, but it's a
Yeah.
lovely, fattier kind of main meal to enjoy with whoever you choose to.
Yeah. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Um,
I didn't like the I don't like Brussels sprouts because I was fed Brussels sprouts when I was a child.
were you?
I think they're the worst things ever.
Oh my gosh, I know. I don't, you know, in my culture, it was something else. But yeah, Brussels sprouts, I don't know. I think you either, it's very polarizing. You either love it or you don't. It's like
Here's something
durian
else.
in my culture.
Yeah. Here's something else that's really weird is I love peanuts. I love satay, but I don't like peanut butter.
Oh, that is interesting.
My wife gives me peanut butter on a knife or in a little
Yeah.
spoon. Our dog
Yes,
loves
yes,
peanut butter.
yes, yes.
I turn away from it, but give me satay, which is very
Mhm.
heavily peanutty. Love it. Give me peanuts. Love it. So I'm just weird. There you go. Just a
Just a
little
texture thing. No, no, no. You're not weird. You're just you.
bit. So we've got
Now,
meal timing.
yes.
So eating within 2 hours of waking up, and then managing the 4 to 6 hours throughout the day, but also matching your protein with the carbohydrates and fibers, and making
Yeah.
sure that it's giving you the fuel you need. What's the third key?
The third key is, I mean, I hope no one out there throws rocks, virtual rocks at me. But the third key, the third key is setting smart goals.
Yeah.
Because just like in business, where you have to set them, and like we probably all heard of the SMART goals.
Yeah.
Um, in nutrition, people tend to just have an all or nothing approach, change everything all at once for a short term, only to realize it's not sustainable. And then what they've done is wreak havoc on their metabolism. Most of the time, they've slowed it down
Hmm.
because of hypocaloric approaches. And then they end up losing a lot of muscle mass because they didn't do a balanced approach. And so then now, after that, they might have lost some weight, mostly muscle mass in a
Yeah.
short term. And now, when it's not sustained, they go back to their usual pattern of eating. They didn't even like overindulge or overcompensate. They just went back to their baseline, but then their metabolism was dropped because of the loss in muscle mass and then the loss of calories that made their body go into a more fasted protective state. So now eating the same amount as their previous baseline, they will gain back the weight they lost plus a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then if they keep doing this, the upward trend is, why am I not able to lose weight? I'm just eating the same amount as I did a decade ago, but actually you did a lot of little things.
Yeah.
So SMART goals are relevant in this case because just change one thing and don't start with the thing that you're least wanting to change. Like if you don't want to sacrifice that beer on the weekends, don't do that yet. Pick the
Yeah.
easiest thing, the path of least resistance.
Hmm.
And when it feels okay and your new normal, then work on something else.
Yeah.
Because if you can sustain it, so what if it takes you a year to form 52 new habits? A year later, 52 habits in, you probably won't even be able to recognize yourself.
Mm.
So
It's an
yeah.
interesting thing. I as a personal thing, I've been drinking Pepsi Max for years.
Okay.
And the last can of Pepsi Max I had, I think was probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I haven't gone and replaced them. So there's no Pepsi Max in the house. And now I just throughout the day, I just now have water, right? So all the time, and I'm not missing it at all, which is a really simple thing. So to your point that it's not this big thing, it's the small thing that if you repeat that over time, you do develop a habit and you actually realize that you don't actually need it, nor do you crave it. So you're just replacing it something with something that's probably better for you anyway in terms of water.
Yes. And Darren, like you are being a good role model to your audience of how you were in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
It's not like someone took it away from you. It's not like your wife said, "Hey, Darren, no more." Because had that happened, there might be some resistance and conflict there. But because
100%.
it came from you, that's why it worked, because you were
Yeah.
ready to change that.
Yeah.
No one had to convince you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we bring this to a close, Angel, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've got to ask you about the book. And the title is You Can't Out Train a Bad Diet. So
Easy, I know.
where did the idea what was the genesis? Did you always have a book in you? Was there a specific, I guess, point to prove? Where'd the book come from, and most importantly, where can people get a copy of it?
People can get a copy of it in Amazon. There's a Kindle version right there. Um, I think it came about because when I started my journey with the Richmond Olympic Oval, my first group of, like, my first portfolio was really the high performance adolescent athletes. So these are the people who their parents are putting them through different sports of high level to try to, really nurture that if so ever they wanted a professional career in sports. Now, it blew my mind how these kids could do such amazing things with their body. And yet, when I would arrive a little bit sooner or stay or, just kind of hang around, the stuff that they were eating are, of course, provided by their parents. And maybe some of the older kids would buy some things in the vending machine or whatnot and make some choices. But it just kind of blew my mind that they didn't understand that what they can get away with right now doesn't mean that they're performing at their best. And it
Mm,
doesn't mean that they can sustain this, because once they turn 18 and everything changes and they're balancing like much more than just high school things, I really wanted to set them up for success. And at that point, I didn't have kids yet, but I would
yeah.
just look at these children and I would just think to myself, my goodness, they are spending 10, 15, 20 or more hours a week trying to pursue something that's deeply important to them. And they have no idea that if they don't work on this key critical piece of eating well every day, even if they don't feel like it,
Mm,
they're not going to go to the podium.
mm,
And it's not even about getting a medal, but it's just about that chance and the opportunity to even compete with the best.
yeah.
They are robbing themselves.
Yeah.
And so I really just wanted this book to kind of convey to them, it doesn't have to be big changes, but I don't want you to make decisions based on a lack of education and a lack of information. So really, I wrote the book for them. And then when the book was alive and in hard copies, I just gave it to the athletes. And I'm pretty sure that the parents read it more than them. But good, because then the parents are mostly doing the shopping. Even though I was never able to play professional sports, I just feel like kids are awesome because unlike adults, when they dream hard.
Yeah.
And they really believe they can do it.
Yeah.
And we as adults who are looking after them and fostering those dreams need to make sure that we are not just giving them every opportunity on the field to physically train, but to really hone in on sports psychology and the nutrition side of things too, and really set them up for success for a lifetime, not just their sports lifetime.
And I think that's a great way to finish, because it's not just a point in time. We're talking about a life cycle, for want of a better term, that in everything that we do, we want to do it to the best of our ability. And if we are dedicated to super performance and exceptional performance, there's lots of things that go into that. One of which often through this conversation, I think tends to get overlooked, and that is your diet. So be really, really clear on what you're putting into your mouth, because just like a rocket fuel that goes into a rocket, if you want that to take off, you got to put the right fuel into that rocket. So Angel, thank you so much for being such a wonderful contributor to the podcast. Where can people connect with you, find out more about what you do? And
Yeah,
what's the
yeah,
best place?
thank you, Darren. I'm on all the different social media platforms. So please, you can send me a message on LinkedIn, a message on Twitter, YouTube even. You can find me. Just search Angel Luk, Dietitian, and you'll be able to find me.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Angel, once again, thank you. I know it's quite late there in Vancouver, so I do appreciate you staying up. And thanks very much for being a great guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thank you for having me, Darren.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.